Hello, in this video we're going to see how fish respond to stress. As you can imagine, fish are very often exposed to various stressors in the course of their life, either environmental, physical or perceived. While mildly stressful situations can have beneficial or positive effects, and this is called the eustress, higher severities induce adaptive but also can have maladaptive or negative consequences, and this is called the distress. Now, these stressors can provoke either chronic stress, which refers to a long time period of stress, for example, in case of a bad water chemistry or an inappropriate water temperature, or acute stress, which refers to a short time period of stress, for example, when chasing a fish in order to move it from one tank to another, or in nature when chased by a predator, or even when a fish is afraid to meet the predator again. Only the thought of meeting the predator again can provoke stress response. So, how do fish physiologically respond? How do they cope with this kind of stressors? Well, in general, when fish are subjected to noxious or potentially harmful stimuli, they present an integrated stress response involving primary, secondary, and tertiary responses. Now, in this picture, you can see that primary responses involve the activation of brain centers, resulting in a massive release of catecholamines and corticosteroids through the activation of two axes. The first axis is the hypothalamus sympathetic neural system chromaffin cells axis, which results in catecholamine release, while the second axis is the hypothalamus pituitary interrenal axis, resulting in a release of cortisol. Now, the results of cortisol in the organism's stress response are regulated by two receptors, the mineralocorticoid receptor and the glucocorticoid receptor. And the effects of cortisol spread on a molecular, cellular, physiological, and behavioral level. Secondary responses involve the immediate actions and the effects of these hormones at the blood and tissue level, resulting in energy, hydromineral, and immune disturbances. Now, if the stress is severe or prolonged, tertiary responses follow, which extend to the level of the organism and the population. These include reduced disease resistance, development, growth rate, reproductive capacity, and of course stress alters the behavior of the fish. Although fish follow a generalized motive of stress response with increased concentrations of cortisol, glucose, lactate, etc., there is species specificity in the pattern and the magnitude of the response. For example, in this study, although fish were subjected to identical acute stressors by chasing for 5 minutes with a net and 1 minute of air exposure, European sea bass Dicetrachus labrax responds with very high levels of cortisol, while other species like common Dendex, migra, and Lasky grouper present a very low response, while other species present an intermediate response. Another species reported to respond with very high cortisol concentrations is the European chub Leuciscus cephalus. As you can see here, it presented 1,400 nanograms per ml when subjected to acute stress. The same goes with glucose and lactate. As you can see in this graph, European sea bass Lasky grouper presented a higher response in terms of glucose than the other species examined. In terms of lactate, again, there are major differences between different species. Here you can see that while a Dutch grouper presented a peak of 4 millimole per liter, sharp-snouted sea bream and European sea bass present a peak of 20 to 23 millimole per liter, which is 5-fold higher. Now, in most of the cases, we have recovery within 4 or 8 or rarely 24 hours post-stress. Cortisol is usually measured by enzyme immunoassay commercial kits, while glucose and lactate are measured by enzymatic colorimetric commercial kits. Now, if you want to see the procedure of blood sampling, you can watch this video taken during the lesson. First, we anesthetize the fish.
It's 86.6.
He takes one, cover the head with a towel.
I try to feel the bone. So the bone is there. Then very smoothly I check if blood is coming. If it's coming, no problem. Then I go slowly like this. If it doesn't come, then I have to change the position. Then I take out the needle. If I don't do it, I'm going to destroy the cells. And I place it like this in order to destroy it later on. And this is now. I put smoothly like this.
And put it in an epidural with anticoagulant.
And then I draw this.
Now, what about the behavioral response? Well, the beauty of biology, but the problem sometimes for researchers, is that there are individual differences in the physiological and behavioral responses to stressors. We have two main categories of behavioral coping styles that have been identified in vertebrates. The definition by Koalhas et al. In 1999 for behavioral coping styles is that it is a coherent set of behavioral and physiological stress responses which is consistent over time and characteristic to a certain group of individuals. First, we have the proactive coping style, which refers to active coping or bold or fight-flight or risk-taking competitive individuals that show low behavioral flexibility. And secondly, we have the reactive coping style, which refers to passive coping or shy or non-aggressive, cautious individuals that they adopt the freezing behavior strategy and are behaviorally more flexible. Now, in terms of physiology, proactive animals have been linked to low stress response and low cortisol production compared to reactive animals. Now, in order to evaluate the coping styles, researchers use various tests like restraining tests, open field tests, novel object tests. They record the behavior of the fish, let's say for 5 to 10 minutes, and then they analyze the behavior, like how much time did they spend on the lower or the upper zone of the tank, or the distance they keep from the novel object, and so on. Here you can see the traces of zebrafish tested in a novel tank protocol and analyzed by video tracking software Ethovision in the fish physiology lab of the University of Crete. What Ethovision does is that it tracks the fish and then records and analyzes all the movement that it does. Now, do you see the similarity? Take a moment and think about it. Which is your coping style? I have certainly found mine during the production of this video. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope I gave you a good idea about how stress works in fish. See you in the next video.